The reward the war was over. David walked through the great hall of the alien palace. His boots echoed on the shiny black floor. Around him, tall alien soldiers in golden armor watched him with cold, glowing eyes. Their faces were hidden behind dark helmets. He felt like a stranger here. A human among giants, the emperor of the alien empire sat on a high throne at the end of the hall. His skin was dark blue, and his eyes burned like fire. He wore a long robe made of silver and gold threads. When David stopped in front of him, the emperor stood up. "Human soldier," the emperor's deep voice filled the room. "You fought bravely in the war. You destroyed our enemies when even my own generals failed. You deserve a reward." David didn't speak. He just nodded. His hands were still bandaged from the battle. His mind still full of screams, smoke, and blood. The emperor raised one hand. 2 guards came forward, pulling a young woman between them. David froze. She was beautiful. Her skin was pale and glowing faintly under the lights. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes, sharp and bright like 2 stars, stared at him without fear. But there was something strange about those eyes. Something cold. The guards pushed her to her knees in front of him. "This," said the emperor, "is your reward. A slave from the royal bloodline of our enemies. She is yours now. Do what you wish with her." David blinked, confused. He looked at her, then at the emperor. "A slave?" he asked slowly. "Yes," the emperor answered. "Take her. She will serve you." The woman didn't move. She kept her head high, her eyes fixed on him, her lips pressed tight. There was no fear in her face, but also no kindness. David opened his mouth to say something, but stopped himself. This was not his world, not his rules. 2 guards handed him a thin chain. The other end of the chain was locked around her wrist. "She is yours," the emperor said again. Then he turned away and sat back on his throne. David stood there for a moment, holding the chain. The woman stood up slowly. She didn't even glance at him. Later that night, in the room they gave him, David sat at the edge of the bed. The woman stood near the wall, her hands folded in front of her, silent. David looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked, no answer. He sighed. "Look, I don't know what kind of game this is. I didn't ask for this. I don't need this." Still, no answer. He leaned back and covered his face with his hands. His body ached. His head hurt. His heart was heavy. When he finally looked up, she was watching him. Her sharp eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "What?" he asked, his voice tired. She tilted her head. Then she spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, but full of anger. "You're a fool." David raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You think you won something," she said. "You think they're rewarding you. But you are already dead." David frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, her chains clinking softly. She leaned down, her face inches from his. "You're not their hero," she whispered. "You're their next victim." David stared at her, confused. "You don't understand yet," she said, "but you will. If you keep me here, if you keep playing their game, we will both die." Her eyes locked with his, cold and sharp like knives. David swallowed hard. "Why should I believe you?" She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You don't have to believe me," she whispered. "You'll see for yourself, very soon." Then she turned and walked back to the corner, sitting on the floor and folding her arms. David couldn't sleep that night. The words kept repeating in his mind. "You're already dead. We will both die." Hours later, when the room was completely silent, he noticed something strange. On the wall, behind the curtain, something was scratched into the stone. David stood up and pulled the curtain aside. There, written in a language He could barely understand, but just clear enough for him to read, were the words, "Run before sunrise." He stared at the message, his heart pounding in his chest. When he turned to look at the woman, she was already watching him from the shadows. Neither of them spoke, but in that moment, David knew something was very wrong, and his so-called reward was only the beginning of something much bigger. Asterisk, the secret. The message on the wall haunted David all night. Run before sunrise. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the strange alien letters scratched into the stone. The words were old, faint, but clearly written for someone like him, a human who could barely read their language. The girl, Lyra, though she hadn't told him her name yet, sat silently in the corner. Her glowing silver hair fell across her face, hiding her expression. But every now and then, he caught her watching him. When the first light of dawn began to shine through the tall glass windows, David stood up. He pulled the curtain fully aside and checked the door. 2 alien guards still stood outside, their weapons crossed, blocking his way. He turned back to her. "Tell me," he said firmly. "What's going on here? What's your game? Why do you say I'm already dead?" For the first time, she smiled. But it wasn't kind. It was sharp, like a blade. "You're starting to feel it, aren't you?" she said softly. "Feel what?" "The walls closing in." David clenched his fists. "Enough riddles. You said if I keep you here, we'll both die. So tell. Who are you really?" She stood slowly, her chains clinking on the floor. She walked toward him until she was only an arm's length away. Then she spoke, quiet enough that the guards outside couldn't hear. "My name is Lyra," she whispered, "daughter of the Emperor." David's eyes widened. "That's impossible," he said. "The Emperor said you're a slave from the enemy's royal family." Lyra shook her head. "That's what he wants you to believe. I am his daughter, but in his eyes, I am unworthy, a failure. So he stripped me of my name, chained me, and handed me to you as part of his plan." David frowned. "What plan?" Lyra glanced toward the door, then leaned closer. "The Emperor doesn't reward anyone human, not even you. You were never meant to leave this palace alive. He gave me to you so he could watch what you would do, so he could enjoy the little game before he kills you." David felt a chill run through him. "Why?" he asked. "I fought his war. I won it for him." Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. "Because you made him look weak. You did what his generals could not. He hates you for that. And now he'll make sure you die before the next sunrise." David stepped back, shaking his head. No, you're lying. Why would he?" But then he remembered the looks from the guards, the whispers in the hallway, the way his room's door had been locked from the outside. He remembered the faint smell of something strange in his food the night before. And suddenly, it all started to make sense. Lyra watched him, her expression softening. "You feel it now, don't you?" she murmured. "You can feel the poison already." David stared at her in shock. "What poison?" He whispered. She pointed at his hands. He looked down and noticed for the first time that his fingertips were slightly blue. He stumbled backward, grabbing the edge of the bed for support. "It's not strong yet," she said, "but it will be by tonight. And once you collapse, they'll throw your body into the pit, and no one will even remember you were here." David's breathing quickened. What do I do?" Lyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You have 2 choices," she said. "Stay here, wait for death, or trust me, and I'll help you escape." David stared at her. "Why would you help me?" he asked. For the first time, her sharp eyes softened. "Because if you die," she said quietly, "so do I." She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small round stone. It glowed faintly in her hand. "This is a beacon," she explained. "It calls the ship, a secret one. We can use it, but only if we reach the outer wall before the sun fully rises." David looked at the beacon, then at the door. "There are guards everywhere," he said. "We'll never make it." Lyra gave him a cold smile. "You forget who I am," she said. "I know this palace better than anyone. I know its secrets. I know where the shadows are darkest." She held out her hand. "Do you trust me, human?" David hesitated. Then slowly he took her hand. "Good," she whispered. "Then follow me." She moved to the corner of the room and pressed her palm against the wall. With a faint grinding sound, a hidden panel slid open, revealing a dark tunnel behind it. "Stay close," she murmured. They slipped into the tunnel just as the first rays of sunlight touched the palace floor. Behind them, in the now empty room, the Emperor stood silently in the doorway, watching the hidden panel close, and on his lips was a small, knowing smile. The escape the hidden tunnel was narrow and dark. Colder than the palace above. David followed Lyra closely, his hands brushing against the rough stone walls. The air smelled of dust and metal, and the faint glow from Lyra's beacon lit only a few feet ahead. Behind them, the faint sound of footsteps echoed. Or maybe it was just his imagination. "Where does this lead?" David whispered. "To the east tower," Lyra replied without looking back. "There is a service hatch there, one the guards don't watch. Beyond it, we can reach the outer wall and signal the ship." David's mind raced. Every step brought more questions. Why was she helping him? Could he trust her? And what if this was another trap? He thought of the Emperor's burning eyes, the guard's sharp weapons, the faint blue in his fingertips. He had no choice now. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, Lyra suddenly stopped. "Quiet," she whispered, holding up a hand. David froze. At first he heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of something scraping against stone. A faint hiss. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They know," she murmured. Before David could ask, a sudden burst of blue light flashed behind them. The wall of the tunnel cracked, and 3 alien soldiers in black armor crawled through, carrying long, glowing spears. "Run!" Lyra hissed. They bolted through the tunnel, the blue light of the soldiers chasing them. Sparks flew as the spears struck the walls, sending hot fragments raining down. A tunnel forked ahead. "Left!" Lyra shouted. They turned, sharply, running down an even narrower path. But just as they rounded the corner, the ceiling above them shuddered. David looked up. Cracks spread across the stone. Then the roof collapsed. A cloud of dust and rock filled the tunnel, cutting them off from behind. David coughed, waving the dust away. When it cleared, he saw Lyra staring at him, her face pale. "That won't hold them for long," she said. "We need to move." They kept going until the tunnel opened into a small chamber with strange, glowing symbols carved into the walls. Lyra stopped and pressed her hands against the carvings. "What is this place?" David asked. "This," she whispered, "was my mother's sanctuary. Few remember it even exists." As she spoke, a hidden door slid open at the back of the chamber. On the other side was a steep metal stairway, leading upward toward faint light. They climbed in silence, their breaths loud in the narrow space. When they finally reached the top, Lyra pushed aside a heavy grate. Cold air hit David's face. They were outside, standing on a ledge high above the alien city. The sky was dark purple, streaked with stars, and the faint light of a nearby moon. Below them stretched a massive courtyard full of soldiers, ships, and weapons. David's stomach turned. "We'll never get through all that," he muttered. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "We don't need to go through," she said. we go above." She pointed to a series of giant, floating platforms that hung in the air over the courtyard, connected by thin bridges and ladders. At the far end, just beyond the outer wall, David could see a faint blinking light, their beacon's signal point. "That's where we call the ship," Lyra said. But before they could move, a sudden blinding light swept over them. David shielded his eyes. A voice boomed from below. "There they are." Dozens of soldiers on the ground turned and raised their weapons. "They've seen us," David said, his voice tight. Lyra didn't hesitate. She grabbed his hand and pulled him onto the first platform. The metal shook under their weight as they ran. Energy blasts sizzled through the air around them. One struck the bridge behind them, tearing it apart. "Don't stop," Lyra shouted. They ran from platform to platform, climbing ladders, leaping over gaps. David's chest burned, his muscles screaming. Halfway across, Lyra stopped abruptly. The next bridge was gone, a massive hole where it should have been. David looked down. The drop was hundreds of feet. "We can't jump that," he said, but Lyra was already removing her chain. She tied one end around a beam and tossed the other across the gap. The chain barely caught on the far platform. "Hold on," she said. David hesitated. "Trust me." They climbed across, the chain groaning under their weight. Energy blasts whizzed past, and sparks flew as one of the beams cracked, but they made it. On the other side, they collapsed for a moment, gasping for air. Then Lyra pointed ahead. "There," she said. The final platform lay ahead, just beyond a narrow, crumbling bridge. The blinking beacon glowed brighter now, almost calling to them. They started forward, but halfway across, a figure stepped out of the shadows ahead, tall, armored in black, with glowing red eyes. David froze. The figure raised a long blade and spoke in a low, cold voice. "You should have stayed in your cage." Lyra's face hardened. David looked at her. "Who is that?" She didn't look away from the figure. "My brother," she said quietly. David's stomach dropped. The figure, her brother, took a step closer, and then, without warning, he lunged out. The blade came down fast, and David barely managed to block it with his arm. Pain shot through him as the blade sliced his sleeve and burned his skin. Lyra shouted something in her language, and her brother hesitated, just enough for David to grab the chain and swing it at him. The chain wrapped around the blade, yanking it out of his hands, but more soldiers were climbing up behind them now. Lyra grabbed David's arm. "We don't have time," she yelled. She pulled him forward, and together they leapt toward the final platform. The ledge cracked under their weight, but they landed. Breathing hard, Lyra smashed the beacon into the ground. A bright light shot into the sky. David looked up and saw a dark shadow descending from the stars. Their ship had arrived, but behind them, her brother's voice rang out, full of rage. "You cannot run forever." David and Lyra stood back to back, staring at the ship above, and the soldiers closing in. David whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Then we'll fight until we can't." And the sky split open. The truth. The ship descended like a dark star falling from the sky. It was sleek and black, its wings stretching wide, glowing faintly with alien runes. The engines roared as it hovered just above the platform, sending a hot wind across David and Lyra. David raised a hand to shield his eyes. "That's our ride?" Lyra nodded, though her face was tight with worry. "If we can reach it before they do." Behind them, her brother stood at the edge of the bridge, his red eyes burning brighter now. Soldiers in black armor climbed onto the platform, forming a wall of blades and spears between them and the ship. David tightened his grip on the chain. "We'll never get through all of them." Lyra's jaw hardened. "There's no other choice," she said. She stepped forward, her eyes locking on. Her brother. "You should not have come back," he said in their strange language. David couldn't understand the words, but he felt the venom in them that Lyra answered in the same language, her voice steady but full of pain. Her brother only laughed, low and cruel. Then he raised his hand, and the soldiers charged. David barely had time to react before they were surrounded. Blades slashed, spears crackled with energy, and the platform shook under the weight of the fight. David swung the chain, knocking 2 soldiers over the edge. Lyra moved like water, twisting, ducking, striking, her chains no weapon in her hands. But more and more soldiers kept coming. David's breath came fast, his arms heavy. He caught Lyra's eyes in the chaos and yelled, "We can't win this." "Not like this." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her sleeve and pulled out another stone, this one glowing red instead of blue. She threw it to the ground. A wave of blinding red light erupted, throwing the soldiers back. David staggered, but stayed on his feet. When the light faded, the soldiers were stunned, motionless for a few precious seconds. Lyra grabbed David's arm. "Run!" she cried. They sprinted for the ship, leaping over the cracked metal of the platform. Her brother roared behind them, and David dared to look back. The soldiers were already recovering. And her brother, impossibly fast, was closing the distance. They reached the ship's ramp, just as it opened with a Histot, an alien pilot, tall and cloaked, stood inside. His glowing white eyes narrowed when he saw them. "You brought him?" The pilot hissed at Lyra. "We don't have time to argue." She snapped back. David stumbled inside, and Lyra followed. The ramp began to close as the first soldiers reached it, but her brother leaped, landing on the edge and slamming his blade into the door. The metal shrieked, sparks flying. Lyra grabbed a weapon from the wall, a strange spear, and rammed it through the gap. Her brother finally let go, falling back as the door sealed shut. Ship shot upward, breaking through the clouds. David collapsed into a seat, breathing hard. Lyra stood at the window, her shoulders tense. The pilot set a course away from the planet. After a long silence, David finally spoke. "You're going to tell me what's really going on now," he said, his voice low. Lyra didn't turn to him. "You already know some of it," she said quietly. "I'm the Emperor's daughter." That much was true. She turned then, her eyes dark. "But what he didn't tell you is that you helped him destroy my people." David stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I fought his enemies, the rebels." Lyra shook her head. "They weren't rebels. They were my mother's people." "My people?" "He used you to wipe them out. He lied to you, just as he lied to me." David felt his stomach sink. "That's not possible," he said, though his voice was hollow. Lyra stepped closer. "My mother was the rightful heir," she said. "But the Emperor wanted power. He made me watch as he slaughtered her. Then he chained me, hid me, and waited for a human soldier foolish enough to do his dirty work. That was you." David couldn't speak. He thought of the battles, the villages burning, the strange alien families he'd fought against, the way they'd screamed her name, Lyra, before they fell. He'd thought they were enemies. Lyra's voice broke. "You killed them," she said. "You killed all of them." David sank into his seat, his hands shaking. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "Would you have believed me?" She shot back. Silence filled the ship. And Lyra looked away, her jaw tight. "But it doesn't matter now," she said. "We have one chance to make it right." David looked up. "What do you mean?" She turned back to the window, her reflection cold and distant. "We're going to take the Emperor's throne," she said. David blinked. "Take his throne?" Lyra's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. "You helped him kill my mother," she said. "Now you can help me kill him." David stared at her. His heart pounding got, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes he hadn't noticed before. Not just anger, not just pain, but something darker, something dangerous, something that scared even him. The ship flew on, deeper into the stars, carrying them toward a destiny neither of them fully understood. And behind them, far away on the planet's surface, the Emperor watched their path on a glowing map. He leaned back in his throne and whispered to himself, "Let the game continue." The plan the ship soared through the blackness of space, stars flashing past like cold sparks. David sat alone near the back, staring at the floor. His hands still trembled, though he tried to hide it. Her words from before echoed in his mind. "You helped him kill my people. You killed all of them." He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, the ones he'd fought, the ones he'd shot, the ones who had cried her name as they fell at the front of the ship. Lyra stood with the pilot, their heads closed together, whispering. David couldn't hear them. When she finally turned and walked back toward him, he saw that her eyes had changed. They were sharper now, colder, but also determined. "We've set a course," she said, sitting across from him. "Where to?" David asked, his voice hoarse. "The outpost of shadows," she replied. David frowned. "What's that?" Lara leaned forward. "A hidden station at the edge of the Empire," she explained. "It belongs to no one, but everyone comes there. Smugglers, assassins, spies, mercenaries. If you have power or secrets to trade, you go there." David tilted his head. "Why are we going there?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Because that's where we start." "Start what?" She leaned even closer, her voice a whisper. "The end of the Emperor." David stared at her, unsure whether to feel fear or admiration. "He's stronger than both of us combined," he said. Lyra nodded. "Yes, but strength is nothing without loyalty. And my father has very little of that left." David hesitated. "And you? Why would they follow you?" For a moment, something soft flickered in her expression, but it vanished quickly. "Because I am the true heir," she said quietly. "And because I will promise them what he never could, freedom." David let out a dry laugh. "You're really going to sit on his throne, aren't you?" Her gaze locked on his, unflinching. "I'm not just going to sit on it," she said. "I'm going to burn everything he built and build it again." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Ahead of them, floating in a swirling nebula, was the outpost of shadows, a massive jagged station, patched together from wreckage and glowing faintly in the dark. David stared at it. "It looks dangerous," he said. Lyra smiled faintly. "It is?" The ship docked at one of the outer rings. As the ramp lowered, the sounds of the outpost hit him at once. Shouting voices, strange music, clanging metal, the hum of alien engines. The air smelled of smoke and oil. David stayed close to Lyra as they walked through the crowded market. Creatures of every shape and size stared at them, some whispering as they passed. Lyra led him to a dark room at the back of the station. Inside, 3 figures waited, cloaked in black, their faces hidden behind masks. "Who are they?" David asked. "My mother's generals," Lyra said. One of the figures stepped forward and spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. "You should not be here, princess," he said in their language. Lyra replied sharply. They argued for a few moments, and David could only watch. Finally, the figure looked at him. "And the human? Why bring him?" Lyra glanced at David, then back at the generals. "Because he owes me," she said. The generals exchanged looks. Then they knelt, all 3 of them, and spoke in unison. "We will follow you until the end." David swallowed hard. After the meeting, they returned to the ship. Lyra handed him a small holographic tablet. On it was a map of the Emperors. Palace. Every hall, every guard station, every hidden tunnel. "Where did you get this?" David asked. "My mother's spies," she said. "They've been watching him for years." David studied the map. "What's the plan?" he asked. Lyra took a long breath. "We strike in 3 phases," she began. "First, we weaken his hold by exposing his secrets, his crimes, his betrayals. We send messages through the Empire, turn his people against him. Second, we cut his supply lines, destroy his weapons, his ships, his armies." David nodded. "And third?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "Third," she whispered, "we kill him." David leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "And you really think we can do all that?" he asked. Lyra didn't answer at first. She just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she said softly, "We have to." The next few days passed in a blur. David trained with her generals, learning their weapons and tactics. Lyra disappeared for hours at a time, meeting with spies, sending coded messages, gathering more followers. But at night, when they were alone, David noticed something. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she would stare into the distance, and her hands would tremble. One night, he finally asked, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" She didn't turn to him. Instead, she whispered, "No, but I don't have a choice." Then she walked away. On the final day before they left the outpost, David stood on the observation deck, staring at the stars. Lyra appeared beside him. "It's time," she said. David glanced at her. "Once we start," he said, "there's no going back." She met his eyes. "There was no going back the moment you took that chain," she said. Then she handed him a small, sharp dagger. "For when the moment comes," she said quietly. David took the blade, feeling its weight in his hand, and in the reflection of the glass, he saw her smile faintly, not out of joy, but something darker. "Let's finish what we started," she murmured. Behind them, the ship's engines roared to life, and the stars began to shift. The plan was in motion now, and somewhere far away, on his throne, the Emperor opened his eyes, as if he already knew. "Let them come," he whispered to himself. "Let them try." Asterisk. The betrayal. The stars outside the ship no longer looked beautiful to David. They looked cold, distant, dangerous. The outpost of shadows was far behind them now, just a faint speck of light swallowed by blackness. Ahead, the Emperor's world glowed like an angry jewel, its skies a swirling storm of gold and fire. David stood in the ship's armory, staring at his reflection in a polished shield. The dagger Lyra had given him hung at his side. He still wasn't sure if it was meant for the Emperor or for him. The generals moved quietly around him, loading weapons, checking devices, giving each other grim nods. They all believed in her. They all believed she could take the throne. He wasn't sure what he believed anymore. The ship's come crackled. "Ready," came Lyra's voice. David straightened and walked to the bridge. She stood there in full armor, silver and black, her hair tied back, her face unreadable. "Everything's set," she said without looking at him. David glanced at the glowing map hovering over the console. Red points marked the Emperor's fleets, his towers, his guards. Green points, far fewer, marked their allies, waiting for the signal. David folded his arms. "What happens first?" Lyra spoke calmly, as though reciting a prayer she'd memorized long ago. "We land near the southern gates. Our allies will already be inside. They'll open the defenses. Once we're in, the palace falls from within." She turned to him then, her sharp eyes locking on his. "And then we climb the throne room steps. Together." David gave a small, tight nod, but deep down, something didn't feel right. The ship descended into the storm. Lightning split the skies around them. Rain pounded the metal hull. Below, the palace loomed, black and gold, rising like a mountain from the city's heart. David's stomach tightened. This was it. When the ship touched down, the generals leapt out first. Weapons drawn. David followed. Lyra down the ramp, the storm drenching them instantly. All around them, chaos erupted. Explosions lit the sky. Soldiers clashed in the courtyards. The Emperor's banners burned, torn from the towers. Everything was moving so fast. Lyra didn't hesitate. She pushed through the gates, her chain whip flashing in her hands, cutting down any guard that stood in her way. David stayed close behind, his dagger gripped tight. They made their way through the palace corridors, step by step, as fighting raged all around them. Finally, they reached the great doors of the throne room. Two of her generals threw them open, and then froze. David froze too. The room was empty. No guards. No Emperor. Just silence. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her breath quickening. This isn't right, David muttered. Then the doors behind them slammed shut, and the Emperor's voice echoed through the vast chamber. Welcome, daughter. From the shadows he emerged, tall and calm, his dark robes untouched by the storm outside. His eyes glowed like fire as he looked at them. Lyra's generals raised their weapons, but the Emperor merely smiled. How predictable, he said. You brought him too, good. David's heart pounded. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Suddenly, one of the generals turned and struck down the soldier next to him. And David stared in shock as another general stabbed a third. In seconds. Half of Lyra's own army had switched sides, turning their weapons on her. Traitors! She screamed, her voice cracking. The Emperor chuckled softly. Did you really think you could outplay me, child? My own blood? I taught you everything you know. David backed away, his dagger still in hand. Lyra spun to him, her eyes wild now. David, she cried, we can still do this. Kill him. Now. But David couldn't move. All around him, soldiers fought, but something inside him froze. Then he noticed something even worse. The Emperor was looking at him. Not at her. You didn't tell him, did you? The Emperor said to Lyra, shaking his head. David frowned. Tell me what? Lyra didn't answer. The Emperor stepped closer, his voice smooth and sharp. Tell him, daughter. Tell him why you really need him. David's grip on the dagger tightened. Lyra's eyes darted between David and her father. Finally, she whispered, You're the key. David blinked. What? Lyra swallowed hard. The throne only responds to someone who has spilled the blood of my people and lived, she said quietly. You're the only one? That's why I chose you. That's why you're here. David staggered back. So all of this, was just to use me? Lyra's hands trembled. It wasn't supposed to matter, she said. We were supposed to kill him together. The Emperor chuckled again. She's just like me, he said. Always lying. Always playing her little games. David's mind reeled. Every memory, the war, the chain, the escape, the plan, it all fell into place now. She'd never wanted him. She'd needed him. The Emperor stepped closer, his voice low. Make your choice, human, he said. Her or me. But know this. The throne has room for only one. David looked at Lyra. She stared back, her eyes pleading now. You can still trust me, she whispered. But David could see the cracks now. The coldness behind her eyes. The hunger for power. He raised the dagger. Slowly. Both of them watched him. Waiting. The room seemed to hold its breath. David took one step forward, and the lights in the throne room went dark. Alarms blared. The walls shook as an explosion ripped through the palace. And in the chaos, David vanished into the shadows, leaving both of them behind. Far below, in the secret tunnels. David ran alone, his mind racing. Neither of them deserved the throne. Neither of them deserved his loyalty, and for the first time, he understood. The game was never between them. It was about him, and he was done playing by their rules. Above. The Emperor roared in fury. Lyra screamed his name, but David didn't stop. Not this time. Asterisk. The choice. The tunnels were endless. David ran through the darkness, his breath sharp and heavy. The walls shook above him as explosions rocked the palace. Behind him, he could still hear their voices. Lyra screaming his name, the Emperor shouting orders, both of them calling to him, demanding his choice. But he kept running. Because for the first time, David understood. They didn't want him. They wanted what he could do, what he was. And he was done being their pawn. When he finally stopped, he found himself in a vast underground chamber. The air was hot here, thick with smoke and the scent of fire. Before him stood the throne engine, the true heart of the Empire. It wasn't a chair. It was a massive, ancient machine, carved from black stone and alive with golden light, humming with quiet, terrifying power. Strange alien runes floated in the air above it, glowing faintly. David stepped closer. It looked alive, as if it was breathing, waiting, watching. For centuries, only a killer of her people could activate it. He placed his hand on its surface. It was warm. And somehow, it knew him. Behind him, footsteps echoed. First came Lyra. Her armor was cracked, her hair loose, her face streaked with blood and rain, but her eyes still burned with determination. "David," she called out, her voice raw. "Stop. This is the only way. If you help me, I'll rebuild everything. I'll make it better, I swear." Her words hung in the air, heavy. Then another voice came. The Emperor stepped into the chamber, tall and unshaken despite the chaos above. His black robes flowed behind him, and his fiery eyes locked on David. "She lies," he said simply. "If you help her, she will burn the Empire to ashes. Only I can keep order. Only I can protect it. Give me the throne, human, and I will let you live as a king." David turned slowly, looking at both of them. Lyra stood on his left, her hand outstretched, pleading. The Emperor stood on his right, calm, confident, smiling faintly. Both of them powerful. Both of them dangerous. Both of them asking for his hand. He could feel the throne engine humming louder now, reacting to his heartbeat. David took a deep breath and closed his eyes. And in that quiet moment, he remembered everything. The screaming families, the villages burning, the chains, the lies. Both of them had used him. Both of them had betrayed him. When he opened his eyes, they were steady. He turned to Lyra. "You only needed me to unlock it," he said. "And once you had it, you would have killed me." Her face tightened. Then he turned to the Emperor. "And you are never going to let me live. You poisoned me. You made me your weapon, your killer." The Emperor's smile faded slightly. David looked at the throne engine again, his hand still on its surface. The runes around it began to glow brighter, swirling faster. A low, deep sound filled the chamber, as if the throne was waking up. David spoke softly now, but his voice was clear. "I choose neither of you." The Emperor's eyes widened. Lyra's face went pale. "David, what are you doing?" she cried. David tightened his grip on the throne engine. "I'm ending it," he said. The runes flashed, golden light pouring from the Yasset machine, filling the room. Both the Emperor and Lyra staggered back as the power surged through David's body. He felt it, all of it, the weight of the Empire, the pain, the hate, the endless screams. It burned inside him. And then he let it go. The throne engine cracked. Then it shattered. A shockwave of golden energy tore through the chamber, climbing up through the tunnels, into the palace above, blasting out into the sky. David fell to his knees, gasping as the power vanished. When the light faded, the throne was gone. Just broken stone and silence. David stood slowly. The Emperor lay against a wall, staring in disbelief. Lyra knelt on the floor, her face blank, tears in her eyes. "You destroyed it," she whispered. David looked at her, his voice quiet but steady. "No one deserves that kind of power," he said. He turned and began walking toward the exit. Behind him, the Emperor coughed out a laugh, low and bitter. "Foolish human." He rasped. David didn't look back. He climbed the steps out of the chamber, into the ruined palace, where the storm still raged. Soldiers and citizens alike stood outside, staring up at the cracks in the sky, the shattered towers, the banners torn and burning. And when they saw him, they stepped aside. He didn't speak. He just kept walking, past the soldiers, past the crowds, past the smoke and fire, until the palace was just a shadow behind him. Later, on a quiet hill beyond the city, David stopped and looked back one last time. The empire was crumbling now. Maybe they would rebuild it. Maybe they would tear each other apart. But it wasn't his fight anymore. He slipped the dagger back into its sheath and whispered to himself, "No more chains." Then he turned toward the horizon and walked into the dawn. The end.